Hi, I'm in my tackle room today, and what I'm going to talk to you about today is how to make a rig. Now, most people think making a rig is really basic. It's a basic procedure, it doesn't take a lot of thought, you know, put some shot on the line and away you go. I'm a little bit different to that. I like to try and create a consistency when I make a rig. It's the only time before being on the bank where you get a chance to make everything perfect, everything correct, everything reliable, everything durable. Nothing's going to let you down when you're fishing. And that is what I think making rigs should be all about, making sure everything's perfect, so when you get on the bank, the rig is there, you've got the same starting point every time you sit down, and you can make something that is consistent, and a consistent tray of rigs and floats that all do the same job. And then on the match, if you break a rig, you can change, and you've got the same setup, everything's ready, you know. Or if you need to move shot about, you know how much you need to move it if you get another rig out, and you can learn from that consistency. And like I say, it's the only chance for a reliable, durable tackle to be set up. When you're on the bank, trying to do it on the bank, be a little bit fiddly, you can rush things and you can make mistakes. And when you're trying to do well in match fishing, one mistake, one fish could cost you a lot of money. So I'll talk you through how to make a rig. You know, there's probably some stuff in here that you might find a little bit basic, but what I'm trying to do today is show you all the things I do, and there might be one or two things that you pick up in there that you think, yeah, that's really good, you know, that's something I don't do, or that's something I want to do. Don't get me wrong, I learn stuff all the time. I've been at the Big One show this weekend, and actually I've learned some stuff from the other guys on the Preston stand, a couple of things about tying knots that I didn't quite do, and I think I might incorporate some of those into my fishing. So just be open-minded with what I'm going to show you here today, and think to yourself, yeah, okay, maybe I can learn from that. Maybe not, maybe you like the way you do it, but this is how I'm doing it anyway. I've got 017 reflow power, and on the floats section of it within my website, you'll see that I use the PB into 2s a lot, so I'm going to make one of these up today just so you can see what's going on. On my desk here I've got a selection of tackle. Okay, first of all I've got my silicone, okay, which is where I'm going to put them on the float. I've got my float and the winder itself. I've got a selection of shot, and I've got my reliable line. Okay, you'll also notice that I've got a board here with a pin at the top and marked out at inch intervals with a black marker pen, so when I've got the rig ready I can set the shot up the same, so it's the same every time I start a match. So here's what I do. I take the line. Now, first mistake I see a lot of people making, they don't trim the end of the line off. If you've bitten the line off with your teeth, or if the lines become ragged, it'll be very difficult to thread through the eye or thread through any silicone. So the first thing I do is just trim the last inch off, so I've got a nice clean cut with the pair of scissors. Okay, take the rig, goes straight forward through the eye of the float. Okay, and then I'm going to take my silicone. Now, when choosing your silicone, it's really important that you get a good, strong silicone that isn't going to move about on the float. There's no point in getting a piece of silicone that moves about on the float really easily. When you move your float, it slides up and down the float. We've all done it, it's really annoying, or something that's too tight and it splits. The silicone I'm using today is just the right size. I've tested it. I know that when it's got this 017 reflow power on the carbon stem, it's not going to slide about, my float's not going to move, and also when I move the float it's going to stay in place. So what I do is I trim 3 pieces off. Always 3 pieces of silicone. I make the last piece a bit longer. Okay, pop that back in there. Take my 3 pieces of silicone. Because I've trimmed the end of the line off, should be pretty straightforward to slip them on. There we go, there's one. Two. See, I'm under pressure here, but we're still doing alright. And 3. Like I said, the third piece is a little bit longer, and I'll show you why that is. When I put it on the float, I take the line and I stretch the line out of the way. Okay, I just wet the base of the float a little bit. That helps it go on a little bit easier, helps the silicone go on a little bit easier, and it can just slide over the top of the float. Like I said, I've got a nice tight piece of silicone on here, nothing that's going to break or damage or anything like that. You know, because I've got the power line, that's what I need. I don't want anything that's going to let me down, and I just slide that up. First piece of silicone you'll see on here is 1 inch below the float. That's really important. just 1 inch there below the float. The reason I do that is if you push it right up underneath the float body, when you pull the line tight, the line pulls into the side of the float. We've all had it. Eyes pulling out the side, line pulling into the body of the float. By putting that piece of silicone 1 inch below the bottom of the float body, what you get is an angle. The line pulls off at an angle. It doesn't pull the eye out and it doesn't cut into the float. I do that on every single rig I make up, okay? It's no matter what float I'm using, 20 gram or 0.1 of a gram, I always put that first piece of silicone 1 inch below, and that prevents any eyes pulling out or any damage from a float body. I've had floats in my box that I use week in, week out, in the winter for example, and I've had them for years because I know that they don't damage. I'll just wet that again and I'll just put the next piece of silicone on. Okay, so we've got 3 pieces like I say in total, really important. Some people still use 2. It's just a bit of education there. Don't be lazy. Make sure you use 3 pieces of silicone. You don't want to get any damage or bend in your float while you're fishing. And then the last piece of silicone, like I said, just wet it again and I just slip it on. And all I do with that last piece of silicone is I'll leave it so there's a little tag over the end. So what I've done here is I've slipped it on and there's a little tag just over the end. The silicone's not all the way on the float. That just helps prevent tangles. Obviously if the float wraps over on itself, it's got nothing to catch on here. So if you slide that, say, a centimetre onto the bottom of the float can flip over that free piece of carbon and tangle quite easily. So there we go, and I just pull that tight. So there I've got my float on the line. Next thing I need to do is I need to think about my shot, okay? We're obviously using small shot, which are lead. One of my personal things, I've just noticed here I need to get my tool out for this job. I didn't have for you before, my pair of pliers. Really, really important to get a good little pair of pliers. For me, there's a couple of reasons for this. When I'm using lead, when I'm making rigs up, I don't want to be biting pieces of lead onto the line all the time. First of all, it can damage my teeth. Second of all, I don't like the thought of putting lead in my mouth week in, week out. It's not really very conducive. Alright, every now and again I might trim a little bit off or do something like that. You know, still really shouldn't do that. But what I like to do is because I'm making a lot of rigs, I like to use my pliers, and it's dead easy to do. All I do is take a selection of shot. Okay, so I've got a few number 8s here. Right, with the first one, I've got a 0.8, so I think it's probably going to take something like, I would say, 10 number 8s and a couple of number 10 droppers. It'll be something in that region. I've got a shotting tube here. So what I've done is I've nipped the float between my legs. I just put the shot on the desk there. Nip the float between my legs. And all I do is I take the shot with a tight line. I've got the shot on, I use my pliers, the shot's on the line. And all I do is I just get my pliers and I just nip that shot gently in place. Sits very, very square, very, very neat on the line, and it's perfectly on there. I haven't had to use my teeth, I haven't had to put any lead in my mouth. Absolutely perfect. And I've got a reliable, the same every time. I've lined the shot up again, on we go, another number 8, and so on and so forth. So what I'm looking to do is I'm going to put, say, like I say, 10 number 8s on this float. Because I think it'll be something like that. From experience, I know that this float takes approximately those amount of number 8s. So I'm just going to keep nipping them on. As you can see, I'm whizzing these on here, no problem whatsoever. No real time taken to get these on. He says typically messing around with that one, but there we go. Same every time. Just got the pliers on my lap. Dead easy to make this rig up. You know, obviously with a lot of floats, if you're using a smaller float, it may only take 3 or 4 number 8s. It may take, you know, a few more other shot or something like that. Doesn't matter. Obviously this is slightly more shot on this rig. Still reliable. That is sitting absolutely perfectly straight, that bolt. A great set of shot on there. I know every shot's the same. I know it's all reliable. That's 7 I've put on there now. Just going to pop another 3 on. And what you may notice is, obviously, you can't use any shot above a number 8 in lead in the UK, which is absolutely fine for me. You know, maybe if I was using bigger lead shot, I would have put a few number 6s on to make a 0.8 up, but it's not allowed in the UK, so I don't do it. I don't really like non-toxic shot on my pole floats. I don't really think that they sit quite as nice and neat on the line, and the presentation can suffer. They also damage your line when you're moving about, so I don't really like them on the line. Right, there we go. 10 number 8s. I'm going to put a couple of number 10s as droppers, which is what I think I'm expecting today, and then I'm going to show you how I position them on the line. So, one number 10, another number 10 on there, and away we go. Now what I'm going to do is just drop this in my shotting tube, take my line out of the way, just drop this in my shotting tube, which I think is just out of shot here, but I'm going to drop that in. I think I've done this before because that float is almost perfect, okay, which is great, just what I want, because what I've got here is got a few number 13s, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to put 3 number 13s, which is just going to take that down to half the bristle. What that was at the moment there, it was just at the bottom of the bristle. When I put a few number 13s on there, it's going to take that to half the bristle, which when you're shotting things up in your shotting tube, half the bristle's about right. With the number 12s and 13s, I'm just going to pop these on with my teeth, because they're only a little trimmer shot. Take me 1 second, very, very soft, tiny shot, so I can just bang them on. Bit fiddly to do the very, very tiniest of shots with pliers, but you still can do it, no problem. There we go, whiz them on, little 3 there, and I bet you that will be absolutely perfect. Just what I wanted, absolutely perfect. So what I'm going to do here, okay, first thing I want to do is I want to get my shot in a situation when I make up this tray of rigs, they're all the same. So I've had a little think, and what I'd like to do is anything under half a gram. If I've got half a gram or below, okay, for all my commercial rigs, I just set them up with a bulk that sits on the top of the hook length loop. Really easy, a loop with a bulk down at the bottom, dead simple to do. Anything under half a gram, that's how I start my rigs off, because often I'll find myself with a 20 centimetre, a 30 centimetre hook length, so anything like that, a bulk's perfect. What I do on rigs over half a gram, up to 10 gram, anything like that, all my rigs over half a gram, I start them off with a bulk and 2 droppers, okay? And what I'm going to do on these commercial rigs, through experience, is I'm going to have my first shot on top of the hook length loop, so 0. I'm going to have my next shot at 5 inches, which I've got to mark on my board. I'll have my bulk then at 11 inches. So I've got, like I said, I've got the first dropper shot on the loop, I've got the next one at 5 inches, and then I'm going to have my bulk of shot at 11 inches. That gap is 6 inches between the bulk and the first dropper, and then 5 inches below that, which is perfect, absolutely perfect, just what I want. You may find on your rigs you like your droppers or something spread a bit further apart. I really don't. I just like a nice tight neat bulk that keeps everything tight at the bottom. So a nice bulk and 2 droppers is what I want to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this float up, and what I see a lot of people doing is they sort their shotting out now where this shot is on the line. Where I've nipped all this shot on the line is where the most damage is on the line. That's where all the damage will come, where I've nipped the shot on, because as soon as I move them for the first time, there's going to be a little bit of a gap created on the shot, and what happens is that damages that initial piece of line. So what I do, once I've moved the float right up out of the way, is I just take these shot and I slide them nicely, because I put these on with the pliers, they obviously slide no problem whatsoever. There we go, just slide them up there, one at a time, nice and steady, away, and I'm not burning or damaging any of this line here. Like I said, I'm just gently sliding them up. I'm not looking to do anything extravagant. You know, you can always wet your fingers a little bit there, just wets the shot, keeps them nice and cool. Just sliding them dead slow, I'm not rushing the process. Sliding all these number 8s up together to form a bulk at the top of the rig. Dead simple to do. And that's what I want there. I want that bulk formed at the top of the rig. There we go, we've got that bulk there. Now I'm going to just move the 2 droppers up. 2 droppers moved up slightly. What I'm going to do is I want to tie my loop in my rig. So I'm going to put that bulk at 11 inches there on the board. Just going to go around the, just need to move that bottom bulk shot up. There we go. Just going to go around the pin at the bottom. Once I've gone around the pin at the bottom, just take the line off. Now a lot of people like to use a loop tire. Personally, I don't like loop ties. Not that I don't like loop ties, I just don't have any problem tying a single figure of 8 loop with my hands. So that's what I'm going to do here. Just going to tie a small figure of 8 loop. There we go, absolutely perfect. Just use my pliers in the loop itself with the pliers closed to pull that nice and tight. Okay, I'm not use my teeth. I'm just going to use my teeth there, but I'm going to use my scissors to trim that loop. 017, don't be biting 017 all the time, not good for your teeth at all. Just put that piece of line in a nice little bin I've got down there. Put my droppers on. So I'm going to loop that loop around here on the pin. Take that first dropper, put it at 5 inches, got the bolt there, set at 11 inches, and there we go. There's the rig all ready to go. A bulk, 2 droppers, lovely, nice and spaced out. There's the float there. Now I've got to put it on the winder, okay? This winder is 18 centimetres. So every time you go once round the winder, once to the bottom, you've got 18 centimetres of line. If you wrap it around 10 times, you're going to have 1.8 metres of line. I've got a 0.8 float here, which I could use in anything up to say 3.5 metres. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this rig round here 20 times. That's going to give me 3.6 metres of line on this float. So I'm not going to pull all the line off and run the risk of a tangle. All I'm going to do is pull a little bit of line off so it's nicely here. Clip it on. Just wrap that round, that box, it's lovely on there. Just going to slide the float up a little bit as I do this because I don't want to start with the float set right at the bottom. Okay, so I put the bulk on one side of the winder, then I start wrapping the line on the other side of the winder. So it obviously, the reason is you don't want to get in the way of that bulk. Just going to count these on, 8, 9, 10. Set the float at 10 onto the winder. Perfect. Pull off another little bit of line. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I'm going to go one for luck down the back side. Just put a loop in. Clip my scissors off. Get the line. I've got one of my sliding stops on there. Just going to form a loop at the back end of the rig. My loop at the back end of the rig there. Perfect. Just pull that nice and tight. The loop that I can go on my Dacron connector on my rig anytime. And I can just flick that over the sliding stop there at the bottom and pull that nice and tight. There we have it. Absolutely perfectly made rig. Every single one the same in my tray, which is really, really important. Okay. I know it's the same, I know it starts the same, and all I do, have I got a black marker to hand? I think I've got one in my box here that I'm sitting on, there it is. Just going to write on the side of this rig 0.17, that's all I write on the side. I don't write on droppers or anything like that, don't write on the spacings, because I know I do the same every time. So I don't need to do any of that, I just like to write on 0.17, that's where I know that is absolutely perfect. Some people write the date on or something like that. I don't do that. I know if I'm storing my rigs in the dark, they're going to last a long time. There's no way they're going to be in my box for 2 or 3 years anyway, so I'm not really too worried about that. You can write the date on if you like, or anything else you'd like to write on the side with a little black marker. Obviously wipes off dead easy. Perfect rig. Goes in my rig trays. Got them in my box. Got them on the side here. Goes in my rig tray along with all the others. All the same. Get one out. Fish a match. Next time you go to the match, you've got the same rig to get out, same starting point, something to learn from. You may find that next time you go, number 10 droppers aren't big enough, you want number 9 droppers. So you'll know that because all your rigs are started the same, you can start making your rigs up slightly differently. But for that size float, bulk, 2 droppers, 8s and 10s, absolutely perfect. That's how I make a pole rig. Maybe there's something in there that can help you make your pole rigs a little bit better too.